Okay, we are recording. All right, everybody. I am here with Ashley Harwood in Charleston. Now, you have to say it for me because I'm not going to say it right because there's certain ways that you say cities that outside
Charleston.
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 Most people say it Charleston, but it's Charleston. So
You got to draw it out a bit.
That's right. I'm originally from Los Angeles. Everybody says you're from LA, not Los Angeles. So he has their own little way of saying it. So that's really neat. So can you tell us who you are and what you do for a living?
Sure. I'm Ashley Harwood, and I am a full-time professional woodturner.
Okay.
The way I make my living, well, it's a little complicated. There's a number of different revenue sources that all kind of come together to make my living. But ultimately, I am a professional woodturner.
Awesome. Awesome. So can you tell us, how did you, now I watched your story on Laguna, did a little documentary on you. So I watched that and I'll have my students, they can take a look at that too. So, but if you want to tell us kind of how you started and how you got into this as a career.
Sure. Yep. So I knew, for pretty much as long as I can remember, I knew that I wanted to make a living making things. I just didn't know exactly what that was going to be. I studied art all throughout school. I focused on sculpture and installation art when I was in college. So I did a lot of very impractical stuff. And then I got out of school and thought, well, how am I going to make a living out of that?
Right.
And I actually thought I was going to go into glass blowing, and my dad ended up steering me in the direction of woodturning.
Let's say when you started learning about turning wood to where you are today, how has that kind of developed for you?
Well,
big question, but
that is a big question, and it's something that's changed a bit over time. I think it went in a lot of different directions that I didn't necessarily anticipate.
Okay.
So, I'd say at first when I got into woodturning, I was looking at it kind of the way a lot of people would look at making things. Like, I'm going to make things and then I'm going to sell the things that I make, and that's how I'm going to make my living.
Okay.
So, so it started out with a class that I took with my dad in January of 2009. It was a bowl turning class. And after that class, I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. I could do this. And I really liked that I was able to use salvaged materials. In wood turning, you can use a lot of things that you found on the side of the road and repurpose it, salvage it, and all that kind of stuff. So I really liked that. And I applied for the Charleston Farmers Market that same year. I also applied for a small grant for my business to get some of my initial equipment and get started. And so I started the farmers market, and I really struggled. I wasn't really making any money. There would be a lot of days where I would go and not sell anything and still pay rent at the farmers market. And I knew that it would take some time to ramp up. At the same time, I was bartending, to pay the bills. So kind of doing that double duty. And I would look around at some of the other vendors, and there were definitely people that were doing really well every week, and I would try and learn from them, whether it was the way that they were talking to customers, the different types of items that they had, the way that they had their booth set up, all those kinds of things. I was constantly, analyzing it and trying to figure out, successful patterns that other people had and ways that they were doing better.
Yeah.
One issue was definitely my skill. It's pretty common, when you take a class like that, it's so exciting, and there's so much information being dumped on you all at once. And then you get back home and it takes like a couple of weeks, or maybe in my case, a couple of months to get everything set up. And then by the time you do, you realize you don't remember anything.
Yeah.
So I'd say it's really important to practice as soon as you can after taking a class. But so I was kind of hacking my way through some things, and was definitely like, white knuckling things, and I had a lot of sore muscles, and I had no idea how to sharpen my tools.
Okay.
And I went to a symposium later that year, and I met a guy named Stuart Batty, who ended up becoming my mentor.
Okay.
Stuart was trying to start up his own tool company. And he said, how about I teach you to be really good at wood turning, and you can help me sell my tools? And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
So it was kind of it was an informal apprenticeship, but like if he was traveling around and teaching, which he did a lot of, I would follow him, go wherever he was going, and be the teaching assistant for the class.
Okay.
So we taught classes in places like Alaska, California. I would also go with him to some different demonstrations, club demonstrations, whether it was in Colorado or Connecticut, Tennessee, a bunch of different places. So, and he would always kind of find a way to incorporate, like, you know, he'd say something like, well, my lovely assistant is going to come and help me sharpen my tools, which a lot of people thought was patronizing. In a way, it kind of was. But it also got me comfortable being up in front of an audience and being in front of a group. So that started, I would say, towards the end of 2009. By 2011, I started teaching classes here in my workshop.
Oh, wow.
At the farmer's market, I realized something that I hadn't anticipated. Everybody was assuming that I was selling a man's work when I was there in the booth, that I was just the person manning the booth. So I thought, well, I need to bring a lathe with me. I need to prove a point. So I started bringing my lathe with me every week. And that also helped me to make the most of my time while I was there. So I wasn't just sitting there doing nothing. Right. And this is one of those things that I didn't really, another thing that I didn't anticipate. It generated more interest in the activity of wood turning than it necessarily did in my work. Okay. So then I thought, okay, well, I can start using this as a platform to sell classes. So I started teaching classes here in Charleston. I think it was that same year, it was in early 2011 that I had my first demonstration for a wood turning club, and that was in Colorado. And so then I was on with the teaching side of things. And over the years, teaching became a bigger and bigger part of what I do. With wood turning, there's a larger organization called the American Association of Woodturners. Okay. So if any of your students are really into wood turning, you know, and they really want to delve deep in that direction, you know, I'd encourage them to get a membership, and they would get a magazine every month and access to all kinds of articles and tutorials and things like that from years past. But they also have a large organization. There are chapters all over the country. You would never know it, but there are wood turning clubs everywhere.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have a few I think we have a few in Minnesota that I have friends that are a part of, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they get together usually once a month, and occasionally they will have visiting demonstrators or instructors, people like me, come by. Okay. And so I guess as far as getting into that circuit, that's something where I would say once you get the invite, like, you just have to go in and you just have to do a good job and blow it out of the water, and then you keep getting, it's very much a word of mouth kind of community. Right. Okay. So that's kind of how I got into the teaching side of things. And I guess as a natural, you know, another natural thing that happened from there, a lot of the students that I have here in Charleston were like, wow, I really like this. I want to keep going. What tools do I buy? Where do I buy them? Right. You know, so I started sending people links like, oh, buy this from here, buy this from here, and then I thought, well, why am I not just selling these myself?
Yeah.
So then I got into selling tools. So nice. Yeah, it's something that's kind of, like I said, it's grown organically over time, and there are a lot of things that I didn't really foresee myself doing at the beginning.
Right. Okay. Very cool. That's really interesting. It's really neat. What is it about? And I do some turning, and for our advanced class, I'm having students just kind of getting acclimated to turning, and we're doing like an offset handle for a mallet. And I even have a student, he bought a blank for turning it. He wants to turn a baseball bat. So doing that kind of thing, I'm trying to get them introduced to it. But what is it about turning that really kind of intrigued you and kind of pulled you in?
Well, I told you I was doing glass blowing before turning. Right. And I would say if I could go back to that, like the things that I found really exciting about that, or that I loved about it, I like the heat. I like the warmth. So that was part of it. Also this sort of like, you know, everything has to be in balance. Like you have to keep the glass a certain temperature, but not too hot. You can't let it get too cold. And then it literally has to be balanced on the end of the stick all the time. And there's a lot of this like sort of speed and tempo and having a feel for the medium and being able to react to the medium and sense what temperature it is and knowing and anticipating how it's going to move based on where the heat is, all that kind of stuff. I really loved it. It's like super, I don't know, it keeps you can't drop your focus for 1 second while you're working with it, right? And I would say there's a lot of similarities to wood turning in that respect, that it does take a lot of focus. It takes a certain sensibility, a certain kind of finesse. It's one thing, like I can sit here as a teacher and I can say, here's step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But wood turning is something where you really have to be paying attention to and react to the medium in real time as it's happening. So I would say that's more my style. That's more my speed. Something that's more about finesse and feel, as opposed to like, building things with straight lines and right angles. That's accuracy and measuring, and it's not me.
And it's because when I was in high school, we had shop classes, and I took woodworking and drafting, but after that really wasn't anything left. So I was taking like ceramics, and so that kind of got me into turning, because you're kind of working with medium and trying to figure it out. And now that I have a lathe, it's like you said, you're reacting to what's going on and trying to figure it out, and that's really cool. So you're talking about your business a little bit. What have been some of the challenges that you've had to kind of work through as you've kind of worked through this from, let's say, 2009 to now? Give me maybe two or three of the biggest ones that you've had to kind of work through.
Oh, well, there were a lot of years with not a lot of money. And, I kind of anticipated that. And I think I set my goals low in terms of money. I was definitely making a choice to have a certain kind of it was all about, I guess, where my life priorities were at the time, and they were not centered around money. And I also, I don't know, I think because I had done so many different crafts and tried so many different mediums in my life, it's like I already knew it's something that takes time to master. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes years. And I was kind of prepared for that. I think if somebody's going to go to school to be a doctor or a lawyer, they're going to pay a lot of money, and they're going to go to school for years and not make anything. So it's kind of the same thing. I viewed it as an investment and hoped that it would pay out. So, but it was hard. It was definitely a strain at times. I mean, I started my business in the last recession. Well, everybody was out of work. I think this is a good time to start to be a woodturner.
That's right. Let's jump in. That's right.
Yeah. So it was kind of like when the restaurant that I was working at, that I was bartending at, closed, then it was sort of a week by week thing. Okay, do I have to get another job as a bartender? And then it was month by month, and eventually I didn't have to. But that was a stress for a while. There were a lot of crazy roommate situations and just trying to make ends meet. That was one side of it. I would say another thing that's been a struggle, and having employees has been a tough thing. I would say. Whether it's, I've had a few people that have helped me out in the studio for years. And I've had people that have come in and said, I want to apprentice with you. I want to learn how to do this. And I would say, okay, well, you'll work for me during these hours. And then during the off hours, the studio will be open to you. You can come in, you can use my equipment, use my tools, and practice as much as you want. And nobody ever practices.
Really?
And then they get upset that they don't learn anything. So
yeah, they just don't have the kind of the drive to do it on their own and just want to.
Right. It's like, I don't know. I guess some people think they're going to learn through osmosis or whatever, or, you know, it's like anything, you know, if you see somebody that's been practicing for years that really knows what they're doing and you see them do something, you're like, oh, that looks so easy. Oh, I can do that. And then
Yeah.
there's that harsh reality of like,
Right.
things don't go that easily, you know,
Right.
the first time you try it, or the 10th time, or the 100th time, or the, um, and I just think, unfortunately, a lot of people these days just aren't, I don't know, aren't so keen on investing that kind of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that kind of goes into my next question, or you kind of maybe answered it, or maybe you could add on to it. So what are some skills that you need to develop as a wood turner that you really need to invest in? Because I know you just mentioned just you got to do it, like you got to put the time in and be dedicated to it. Is there any
Right.
is there anything else that you would want to highlight or kind of push out there?
Oh, well, time is one thing, but you also want to make sure that you're practicing good techniques.
Yeah.
Um, some people like to brag about being self-taught, and I wouldn't recommend that. I just, there are so many things that you can struggle with and try and figure out on your own. And, you know, it probably would have taken me at least 20 years
Mm-hmm.
to try and figure out what I learned from my mentor. You know, he had the benefit of learning in the trade in England. He learned from his father, who learned from his father.
Mm-hmm.
Do I really want to try and figure all that out again on my own?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I would say it starts out by finding somebody with a really good set of techniques, somebody who can explain how things work and why they work,
Right.
and, you know, why their techniques are effective. And then studying those techniques and putting in the time and the effort in the practice. As far as, um, you know, if you want to go the next step and make a living at it,
Mm-hmm.
there's all these other useful skills that you could have as a business person. One thing I would say, one thing that was a really big benefit to me, my father is a business consultant.
Okay. Yeah, that's
So,
yeah, very
you know,
convenient.
there were a lot of times when I was struggling. Like I remember, you know, when you're at the farmer's market, um, they, for the first 4 years or so, they wouldn't let in any other bowl turners. I was the only bowl turner. And I started to do pretty well with it.
Yeah.
And then the management changed and they let in another bowl turner. And I heard these two guys talking in my booth one day. One guy says, "That's a really nice bowl," you know, looking at one of mine. And the other guy says, "Well, yeah, but there's a guy down the way that copies what everybody else is doing and sells them cheaper." So
Yeah.
uh, I was telling my dad about this. I was like, "Dad, I can't believe it. It's so not fair. You know, that guy's retired. He doesn't need the money. He's not trying to make a living. It's just not fair." And he said, "Well, Ashley, you can't expect to be in business and not ever have any competition."
Right.
You know, he's basically like, "Welcome to reality,
Mm-hmm.
figure it out." So I thought, okay, I need to start making things that he either can't make or doesn't want to make. I need to find other types of products, other ways to attract people and draw people in. So that having the business expertise definitely helps. And I cannot believe that I got out of art school and business classes were not a requirement. I can't
Mm.
believe that.
That's a really good point.
So I would say take a business class, you know, learn a little bit about running your own business.
Mm-hmm.
In these days, you know, there are certain computer skills that definitely change your ability to be able to bring your skills and bring your products to your audience. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
video skills
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
big.
Yeah.
You know, website building skills,
Mm-hmm.
graphic design, things like that. But I would say, you know, the video and photography these days is just, it's such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've got a couple more questions for you. So if,
Mm.
so, you know, for me, I'm just a lot of students have never turned anything before. It's kind of the first time on their lathe, and currently we've just got a couple older Delta, I think they're a 12-inch throw on a 36-inch bed, and they do the work. They do the trick. Um,
Mhm.
so what for someone, let's say a student who's trying to kind of get into this and kind of learn the ropes, what would be some good resources that you would recommend to them, of- besides yourself, of course?
Mhm. As far as learning turning,
Yes, yes,
mhm. Well, definitely the AAW that I
right.
mentioned earlier.
Yep.
And, I would say one thing um, that's a really great idea or a great way to be exposed to a lot of different approaches to wood turning is to attend a wood turning symposium.
Okay.
There's a national one that happens every year. Don't know if it'll happen this year. I think
Right.
it's supposed to
Okay.
be um, in June in Louisville, Kentucky this year.
Okay.
It moves around to different cities.
Okay.
But aside from the big national one, there's regional symposiums that happen all over the country too. And those symposiums will bring in instructors, all different types of wood turners from all different parts of the country.
Mhm.
So it's a good way to see a smattering of different approaches,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all kinds of different things that people make. It's not just bowl turning. There's also spindle turning. There's big table leg turning, and then there's finial turning, and then
Yeah.
there's box making, and there's some people use the lathe as a sculpting tool.
Huh.
There's just so many different things that you can
Yeah.
do with it, and so many different approaches.
Right.
So I think, as far as getting an idea of which one of those directions you want to go in,
Mhm.
attending a symposium can really be really great.
Awesome.
And that would give you a good idea of who you want to study from or who you want to try and learn from.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that's really great advice. So I've got a lot of friends, well, especially on social media, who do a lot of turning, that are kind of all in different states, and they talk a lot about different symposiums they've gone to and have learned a lot, and talking about who they learned from and why they're so great. And so yeah, they're always kind of pushing out whoever was the teacher there, as far as what they're learning and
Mhm.
those skills that they are incorporating, and then you get to kind of see them practice what they've learned and kind of go
Yeah.
from there. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. I would say it's tough. You can definitely you can learn tidbits from attending the symposiums and things like that. I wouldn't come out of an hour and a half long conversation though thinking that I know everything about how that
Right.
person's doing that thing.
Sure. Sure.
But it just exposes you to that and gives you an idea of which direction you want to go to or different directions you could go in.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. I think that's all I've got for you. If a student wants to find out more about you and what you're doing, where can they find out more about you?
Well, I'm on Instagram as Ashley Harwood Turning. I also have a YouTube channel. If you just search for Ashley Harwood, it'll come up. And I have a couple of websites. I have ashleyharwood.net. And if you're looking for tools, I have some tools on ashleyharwood.com. And yeah, that's about it. My website is, you can tell that I didn't do web development in school, but it is what it is.
And that's okay. I mean, it's the same thing. You're getting yourself out there and working it through. So yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you stopping by and visiting with us in class.
Thank you, Jay.